Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about a truly bizarre series of signal texts between Anna Bower, a senior editor at Lawfare, and Lindsay Halligan, the newly minted U.S. attorney, or acting U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, handpicked by Trump, notwithstanding the absence of any federal prosecutorial experience, to go in and do his bidding of getting indictments of Jim Comey and Tish James, the Attorney General of New York, which she did dutifully, all on her own, apparently, and that's because nobody in the office wanted anything to do with these obviously nasty indictments that didn't satisfy the sacrosanct principles of federal prosecution, saying you have to have evidence to convict beyond a reasonable doubt and believe they're guilty. These are simply her placating Trump by doing political reprisal prosecutions and doing it, unsurprisingly, in what looks like a very amateurish way. And as illustration of her inexperience, we have really, I've never quite seen anything like it. She reached out to Anna Bower, did Lindsay Halligan on Signal, and initiated a chat discussion that went for a couple days and just show Halligan to be a rube, completely inexperienced and out of her depths. She has no depth, so any depths, she's out of them. A bully, and maybe a scofflaw, maybe a rogue who, based on her treatment of grand jury information. Okay, this is about the reporting in the New York Times, or it's what prompts it, trying to make heads or tails of the indictment that was returned, which seems to be, if it's really poorly done, it's a piece of trash indictment that is totally confounding. But anyway, it looks like the U.S. wants to say something like, James, held this out as a secondary residence, but then really treated it as an investment property. And why is that? Because her niece who lived in it, grandniece, I think, paid rent. So it was a rental property, they want to say. And that's not the right mortgage that she applied for. Now, the niece testified in a grand jury before in another part of the state that she never paid rent. And that testimony was not even presented to the grand jury. But anyway, that's a fact that's going to come into play. Anna Bower writes a follow-up story on the indictment and notes this reporting from the New York Times that says, she purchased it. She would stay there. This is James for an extended period. And the great niece who had been in sort of tough straits, it was mainly for her. She lived there rent-free. And after Bower reports this, she gets, out of the blue in her Signal chat, Anna, Lindsay Halligan here. You are reporting things that are simply not true. Thought you should have a heads up. Let me just start there. Man, oh man, that is like for a U.S. attorney to do it, whether or not, and it does, violate certain kinds of at least practices of the DOJ, and you need to have approved it, etc. We're seeing this in the whole Comey McCabe stuff. It's not a casual thing to reach out to a actual reporter as a U.S. attorney. She did it. I was a U.S. attorney, and let me tell you, I would never, ever, I wouldn't have responded if it came from them, but I would never have reached out. And then what follows is, you can imagine every once in a while asking your deputy to sort of explain why a fact seems wrong. But she weighs in, you're reporting things that are simply not true, thought you should have a heads up. Anna Bower has met her once years ago, and she thinks at first it's a prank. But after it makes clear that it really is Lindsay Halligan, she responds accuracy is important to me. I'd love to hear what you thinking. Can you tell me, where we first met? And she realizes it really is Halligan talking. Okay, I think I said up front, rube, bully, and possible rogue. I'm going to stick to all of those. The rube part is really, this is in many ways the most stunning. She goes through, does Halligan, this whole thing over a couple days, as I say. And then she says at the very end, by the way, everything I ever sent you is off record. You're not a journalist, so it's weird saying that. I mean, she is a journalist, but just letting you know. Like, huh? Anybody who swims in the pond of DC and talks to journalists knows there is no such thing as off the record unless you've established it up front, which is just what Anna says. I'm sorry, that's not how it works. You don't get to say that in retrospect. Yes, I do. She said, no, you don't. It's obvious the whole convo is off record. There's disappearing messages and it's on Signal. So the belated assertion after the whole conversations took place just displays her as a rank amateur, you, especially a journalist you hardly know, and swimming in those waters, it is crazy. And this one looks to me like maybe she did do it just on her own, and she is like, this is right up there, with the sort of basics. You learn this in, first day in U.S. Attorney School, or even assistant U.S. Attorney School. You don't have much occasion to talk to reporters, but never try to have something off the record without establishing it up front. Okay, that's the rube part. It is just rank amateur conduct. The bully part. This whole thing consists of about 90% of it is just Halligan saying you're making a mistake, you've got this wrong. And never telling what it is. Bauer says again and again and again, I'm all ears. What am I getting wrong? Something like, honestly, so much. I can't tell you everything, but your reporting in particular is just way off. I had to let you know. It's clear your sources. Okay, there's like at least half a dozen versions of this where she just goes back. Says, you're assuming, here's one that's already dancing around grand jury material, which I'll get to, but you're assuming exculpatory evidence without knowing what you're talking about, jumping to conclusions does your credibility no good. And then she talks about the Times bitterly, and they are disclosing grand jury information. I guess I expect them to do that, but I was surprised by you running with it. Remember the part about a rube and not knowing the first thing? Stunning thing for her to say. Newspapers can disclose grand jury information if they can get their hands on it. That's one of the reasons that prosecutors are strictly forbidden from doing so. But Halligan doesn't even understand that. And instead, she just substitutes again and again as saying, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And then it does get pretty darn aggressive. It does your credibility no good. You're biased. Your reporting isn't accurate. I'm the one handling the case, and I'm telling you that. If you want to twist and torture facts to fit your narrative, there's nothing I can do. Waste to even give you a heads up. Okay, what facts are you talking about, please? And what does it have to do with? So that she just continues to bully her, and that's in that way, but without even making any kind of reasoned argument or argument based on the facts, which maybe she couldn't do because of the grand jury, if she would say so. She does mention I at one point can't give grand jury information, and it's the same thing after this has all come out this morning. The administration is basically slapping Anna Bauer around completely illegitimately. She's done impeccably what a reporter does, especially when somebody reaches out to them. And then just finally on the potential rogue part. So you just do have this is Halligan kind of dancing around grand jury material and, suggesting suggesting certain facts that sure seem as if she's letting on grand jury material. And it's especially over this issue of whether rent was paid. And, it's not a full representation of what happened, what you write. You're assuming exculpatory evidence without knowing what you're talking about. That is really dancing around an assertion that the grand jury heard other things and she doesn't have the full story because she doesn't know grand jury evidence, as of course she's not supposed to. And Halligan's kind of, teasing it out and playing footsie with it it seems to me a very likely violation of Rule 6 to add to the ledger of the things that Halligan has done wrong, starting with, of course, doing Trump's bidding for improper reasons in the first place. So just one more sign of the absolute amateurish hands that are on the tiller of this prosecution that may come out either in the prosecution or in motions to discipline her. But man, oh man, I'm here to tell you as a former U.S. attorney, it is crazy stuff, especially this talk for back and forth, and then say, oh, this is off the record. No one with any sophistication would ever do that. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.